the Freiburg New Church Assembly. Today is Monday, August 3rd. We're in the first session of the second week. Our theme is the sermon that George Dole sent to the messenger in 2021. I'm Gard Perry, and my title is Background to George Dole's Sermon. As published in the website, our theme reads, on June 23rd, 2021, 6 days before passing fully into the spiritual world, 6 days before passing fully into the spiritual world, the Reverend Dr. George Dole sent a sermon to the messenger for publication titled The New Church. It can be thought of as his last words for us before he died, and they are the basis for this week's theme. Presenters will have received the sermon in advance and will respond with their way of reading George's last effort to send us something he felt was important. So before I begin, there's a bit of a backstory. This talk is going to take a sharp turn very early that I had not anticipated when I began this work. The background to suggesting that George Dole's sermon be the theme for this week was prompted last year by Dean Curry was wandering around camp carrying a hard copy of the 2021 Messenger, edited by our own Becky Greenwood, with George Dole's sermon prominently opened and underlined with pencil marks all over it. And anyone who would listen to him, he said, please come over here. I want you to see this sermon. It's significant. Well, I felt somewhat obligated to sit next to Dean. Looked at it, and I said, Dean, you're right. You know, I'm going to suggest that maybe you and I could suggest that that be the theme for this week. And so far, so good. And the text I read for the website, those who composed it, among them is, I count myself, believe this to be the case. 6 days before passing fully into the spiritual world, Dole sent this sermon that is the text for our theme this week. And we inferred, we surmised, he must have thought that this was going to be his last word, and he sent it in. So far, so good. We're going to take a pretty sharp, hard turn in just a moment, and you'll recognize it when it happens. So here we go. Thank you all for being here, those of you who are present, and those of you who may be online. This morning, I wish to place the sermon in the context of what turns out to be another document that George completed in early June. I received it as an attachment to an email. In the subject line of that email, George wrote 2 words, the latest. He then hit the send button on June 25th, 2 days after he had sent the sermon to the messenger editor. And a mere 4 days before he died. The latest? I said to myself, an attachment with a new project on which George had begun work 2 days after he sent the messenger article? What gives? What gives is I had missed the significance of those emails when they arrived in my inbox, for I had filed them for a close reading at a later date. Upon that later, closer reading, I found that George did not send the sermon to the messenger thinking it would be his last word for us, as I and others had thought was to be the case. Rather, he had begun working on another document that was going to be his next project, and he thought he was going to have enough time to at least get a running start on it. Here I add that the sermon he did send to the messenger is important. It is worthy of our attention. Our lecturers will bring their insights to it, as will I. in this as our theme for this coming week. Now, though, I focus on George's new and latest idea, which I believe he would have sent to the messenger, but it wasn't ready. So he must have gone to his sermon file, scanned titles from the last decade, landed on one that came closest to the title for his new work. That was The New Church, and he sent it to the messenger. Looking back then, after many, many weeks into my email, I found not one but 3 emails George has sent to me with reference to this new idea. I will summarize each email briefly, and then for the body of my talk, I will read George's idea for his new project that he titled Platform for World Peace. The 3 emails were dated March 13th, June 9th, and June 25th, 2021. On March 13th, George wrote, "Dear Gard, I woke up yesterday morning with what feels pretty good as a completion of my previous work upon which I have been working," and that was his text for a monograph titled Swedenborg's Learning Curve. George had been working on that for a long time, and he wanted to get it off his desktop. He rushed to finish it, only to realize, because his new project was beginning to take priority and he wanted to get started on it. That was March 13th, 2021. On June 9th, I received the next email with just one sentence. "Gard, the new document is coming quickly. More soon. Love, George." June 25th, 2 days after he'd sent in the messenger article, I received the email with the subject line, "The latest." "Dear Gard, I'll have a little bit to say about this paragraph in just a moment, but this is what he wrote. Dear Gard, Swedenborg's pervading interest was to restore the lost theology that had made all religions one. Realizing this, he started drafting New Jerusalem and its heavenly teaching. The bulk of that book is about what it is to become more truly human. It makes virtually no use of Scripture, writes George. Finally, we should regard New Jerusalem and its heavenly teaching as an outline of the theology for an inclusive, global, new church, which is real, here and now. At the present day, that church has billions of members in very good standing who are not Christians. It should be a mission of today's Swedenborgian contingent of Christianity to start trying to rally the troops, so to speak. All of that has prompted me to write a Platform for World Peace document attached, in which I say the new church has a legitimate place in the global new church. I believe it should be a leading voice, and I think time is ripe for actual motion in that direction. Love, George." Okay. He died 4 days later. Went into the hospital for the last time 2 days later. George thought he had time to do this. So the backstory here. George is referring to the shorter work published in 1758, The New Jerusalem and its Heavenly Teaching. Essentially, that book, published a mere 2 years or so after completing the Arcana, is an index to the Arcana. And it is Swedenborg's reversed summary of his emphasis in the Arcana from, as George notes, not dismissing either side of this equation, of course, the shift is from divinity to humanity. And Swedenborgians are wise to realize that this is an equal equation, two poles of humanity, divinity, and humanity. And George realized that emphasizing the humanity is what, and the human process is what Swedenborg was now doing in New Jerusalem and his Heavenly Teaching. He realized that as early as 2006, and he gave his first lecture on this subject in 2006 here at the Assembly, recognizing that he wanted to work on the New Jerusalem and his Heavenly Teaching. Life got in the way. George was needed to teach biblical exegesis, Swedenborgian ideas for the theological school, which had moved to Berkeley, California. Fall course, he worked every fall on a course, taught the course. Every spring on a course, taught the course for the next 15 or so years. In the background, he heard a voice. It was mine and perhaps others. George, when are you going to get back to the New Jerusalem Heavenly Teaching? Because you are going to translate that from the Latin, not into the standard Latin translations into English, but you are going to use your new method. He called it meta-translation, translating it into contemporary language because it's such an important document. Yes, I'll get to it. Yes, I'll get to it. He got to it on June 25th. 2021. So what you'll hear now, I'm going to read the text. It's a little bit of a text. We'll be within our 35-minute time frame, I'm quite sure. And there's so many important ideas. I'm going to suggest, as I did before, it's very likely at the end of the talk, I'll ask you in twos. You could sit with the person you're sitting next to. If you're all by yourself, you might want to wander around and sit next to someone else in threes and just say, what did you hear that you believe is significant? Just one idea, the most important one. And after a few minutes, we'll call back to order and we'll hear what came up for you. So dialogue in a small group of 2 or 3 is kind of wet the whistle and prime the pump, and then a larger context. A platform for world peace. George Dole. As globalism waxes, the urgency and desire for peace on earth intensifies. And quote, if only, ... Shangri-La, Utopia, Erewhon, the holy city New Jerusalem, happy hunting grounds, the pot of gold at the end of a rainbow. We dream, we long, but the goal seems as far away as ever, sometimes even farther. The sad fact is that for centuries we have been making impressive progress in designing and manufacturing bigger, more efficient, more lethal weapons of war. Something must be wrong with our basic priorities. I am encouraged by the fact that we have not used the most lethal weapons we have manufactured, which may be an historical first, but there is no guarantee that this rare stroke of sanity will stand the test of time. It seems that day after day the bad news is so noisy that we have to look hard to see the good, but the good is right there, if we look for it. Stunned by the vicious cruelty of 9/11, we were functionally blind to the significance of worldwide outpouring of revulsion and sympathy. America was wounded. Perhaps, just perhaps, the superpower was finding itself humbled. And with very little effort, we might have ridden that wave of sympathy toward closer bonds with the more wounded nations of the world. In 2004, responding to the Indonesian tsunami, we sent the hospital ship Mercy. 500 doctors were needed. 3,000 volunteered. The reaction to the murder of George Floyd was virtually instantaneous and global. Some worldwide nerve was touched, and the whole issue of heartless abuse of power was exposed and disgraced, even in countries where race was not an issue, countries that are predominantly non-white. The so-called moral majority movement of the 1970s may have been tainted by self-righteousness, but there is no such taint to the huge reservoir of compassion. There does seem to be a kind of global mindset with principles that transcend differences in race, ethnicity, religion, color, gender, wealth, education, and other factors that divide us. I believe that the fundamental principles of this mindset can be articulated, and that when they are, its participants will recognize them in themselves and in others. I believe that we would do well to articulate them. And I've given this matter some thought, he writes. And the result has been shaped by immersion in the theological work of Emanuel Swedenborg, in particular, the New Jerusalem and its heavenly teachings, in which he set out to present a theology which would unite all religions, regardless how much they might differ in matters of doctrine. It's the bright side of globalism. In an effort to present that theology in contemporary language, I, George Dole, have gone through and GHT, chapter by chapter, condensing, rephrasing, clarifying, transposing, always with an effort to be faithful to the meaning of the Latin text. I've deliberately omitted the explicitly Christian material with which the book ends, regarding it as intended to show that the Christian religion is fully at home in the new church. Now he has a new title for all concerned, and I will add that the rest of the text, for those who might not be familiar with the preface to the New Jerusalem and its heavenly teaching, there is a preference, which is a reference to a text in Matthew, which is the coming of the new church. And then George simply turned the page to the table of contents, and taking each phrase in the table of contents, he wrote a sentence or perhaps even a paragraph. So we're going to go through George's transposition of the preface, which was a reference to the coming new church, and then step by step through each of the table of contents phrases. To begin with, and these are basically almost quotes from Swedenborg, but they're just slightly changed into George's language. To begin with, the most important thing for everyone to know is what is meant by good and what is true and how they relate to each other. George writes, I define good as I care about you, and truth as I want to understand you. Those terms serve to define each other. That is, a feeling or motive is good if it prompts me to care about you, he writes. And a thought or perception is true if it helps me to understand you. Try weaseling out of that, he writes. Conversely, a feeling or motivated is bad if it tends to distort my feeling about you, or a thought is false to the extent that it leads me to denigrate others. These may serve as examples or principles that are comprehensible and useful to anyone, regardless of ethnicity, religion, etc. It should, of course, be borne in mind that local circumstances and traditions will affect the forms taken by the effort we make to live by these principles. Going on to the next item in the table of contents, George writes, we are capable of living up to them because we as human beings have two fundamental faculties, the ability to feel and the ability to think, colloquially known as will and understanding, heart and mind. These abilities are distinguishable from each other but inseparable. They are in constant dialogue. And we alternate between times when our primary need is for warmth and companionship and times when our primary need is for solo time for seriously sorting things out. We have different levels of consciousness. We can be so acutely aware of the physical world that we pay no attention whatsoever to abstract matters or interior things. We can be so absorbed in thought or deeply meditative that we become virtually unconscious of our physical surroundings. We can sink deep into meditation, encounter subconscious levels of understanding. We can have moments that transcend consciousness of an ordinary sort, an ineffable awareness of the essence of things. Our more specific, our more superficial levels of consciousness are confused by a constant barrage of messages from the confused world we live in, and we need constantly to be looking deeper to find our true bearings. We are essentially purposeful beings, motivated by our feelings, our goals. These are multiple, and we have a hierarchical order. We may do many small things to achieve greater things. And whether we know it or not, each of us has an overriding, private, primary goal, or ruling love, the essence of which, consciously, is the desire to become a certain kind of person. This is our constant hidden agenda, whether we know it or not. It is of critical importance that we rank our loves in a realistic order. If we elevate a more superficial love, we sentence ourselves to ongoing disappointment, repeatedly achieving what we want and finding ourselves unsatisfied. The most superficial love, the love of self, in its pure form, is narcissism. And the more glorious we claim ourselves to be, the more impossible it is for us to be that. We live with a constantly growing terror of being unmasked. Akin to this, but somewhat less corrosive, is the love of possessing the riches of this world. In its pure form, it's avarice. And the only word in the vocabulary of such a person is more. No matter how much we have, that's what we want. Enough simply is meaningless. Far more promising is a love of the neighbor. But here we must move with care, because the word neighbor is an elusive one. It can be taken to be me and mine, that is, my family, my team, my country, exclusion of others, in which case the net effect is to demonize everyone else. Then anyone who does not want to lead my kind of good life is just not a neighbor. Properly prioritized, though, these loves, these laws are all good, very good, every one of them. I should love myself because I can be a blessing to others. I should love this beautiful world and its wealth because all the good it can do. It supports our lives. It's enchanting. I should love the neighbor for similar reasons and should recognize that I'm embedded with my neighbor in human community. Every word that I speak, writes George, I have learned from someone else. I'm a miniature embodiment of the human race. Now, this particular prioritization, love of the self, world, neighbor, and the Lord, in right order, works because it comes from the universe itself, or more precisely, from the creativity of the universe. These are not rules that clever we, have invented for our own rather mixed motives. These are laws according to which our universe was created, laws of creativity itself, laws from our Creator. Our beliefs, writes George, are inseparable from our values, as the truth is inseparable from what is good. What we want, we value, focuses our very selective attention, and we react to our circumstances then as we perceive them. If we believe in love for the neighbor, for example, we will be asking, how can I help? If we profess to believe in love for the neighbor and therefore faithfully practice it, even reluctantly, the profession gains substance and can gradually become a genuine belief, a genuine love with heart and mind united. Reverent behavior, including formal worship, flows naturally from reverence, but unless our worship of divinity expresses itself in lives of service and love to others, it's merely superficial. If that's the case, we are simply exalting ourselves, and the display of holiness is essentially self-serving. In some subcultures, failure to attend church regularly is regarded as a sin or moral weaknesses, and this can be very bad for business. Freedom is doing what we love to do without restraint. We may think that we are asserting our freedom when we do something rebelliously, knowing that it is wrong, but closer examination will reveal that this is more reaction than action, often prompted by fear. Hostility toward others leads us to assume that others are hostile to us, with the result that we perceive the world around us as full of threats, and we act accordingly. One of the ways we defend ourselves is by privately or publicly bolstering our sense of personal worth, claiming credit for what we have achieved, not recognizing that in doing so we undermine the value of what we have done. Accepting gratitude is a good thing, and one thing, wallowing in praise quite another. Dealing with this requires serious self-examination. I find this a practice that can be discouraging. It may help to remember that we are not just the person who disappoints, we are the person who's disappointed in ourselves. The life that is flowing into us and sustaining us is more beautiful than even our highest aspirations. It certainly feels like our own life, and it requires hard times when it fades, times of doubt and despair, to convince us that it is a gift, not a possession. This may seem a high price to pay, but the reward is heavenly. You can simply go with the flow, free from the burdens of pride and guilt, completely at home with yourself, your family, your community, your world, your Creator. Over time, you have become a completely new person. You have been reborn. The text trails off at that point. Full enough, I suspect. That's a taste of George's eloquence, his large mind. I think of it as George is going global. And as you may have heard, he believes that the new church has a significant role to play in articulating these values from New Jerusalem and heavenly teaching in a way that could be received by others. So, as I said at the beginning, you may have been struck by 1, 2, 3 ideas. I am going to ask you if you just find a neighbor. 2s or 3s is probably best. Stand up. We're going to take a little break here in the presentation. That was about a half an hour. So all of you just find 2 or 3 people. You can stay with people you know very well. That's not a problem. And introduce yourselves if you need to. And just one idea would be good from each person. as reluctant as I am, as reluctant as I am to bring us back, ding-a-ling, Om, Om, someone help me bring the group back. Someone help me bring the group back. Thank you. Alex, thank you. Way to go, Alex. I was very reluctant to bring us back to the full group because I love being part of a small group. There's lots of great things that can happen, and I'm going to let this go as long as I can. And of course, someone gave me the hairy eyeball. Come on, start, get back again, in a good way. I'm going to observe there were 5 pods or clusters of people. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's a group, fine. But if I were to start with members, say your first name and the names of the first name of the people. Oh, yes. If you would be willing, when it comes to your turn, if one person will be willing to say their first name and the others in your group, I would be very grateful, and I think others in the room would. And Jonathan was sitting with that group.
I can't remember their names.
Okay.
So, here. I'm Jonathan.
If you're willing, is just say one idea that you want somehow, and we'll go around one idea. Hello. Hi, Becky.
Hello.
Becky is my best of friends. Would you say your name and the other people in the group?
Sure. My name is Johanan, and I was sitting with Jonathan and Chelsea. And I'm struggling to rest on one idea that we might have
Anything that comes to your mind, this goes to everybody.
discussed.
Within a minute or so.
I know Chelsea spoke to the divinity in creativity and how powerful that was for them. For me, I felt an appreciation for the simplicity of I care and I want to understand. That's very accessible to, I think, to everyone can understand what that feels like to have a desire, to care and to desire to understand. And Jonathan, I don't know if you want to speak to an idea you had. We didn't quite get all the way around.
I think that's sufficient to get everybody in. Speak about that.
Wonderful.
Johannes, you did beautifully. Just pass the mic around, and that will model it. You want to do this?
Doesn't matter. So I'm David, and I'm with Calvin and Paul Martin. Anyway, we had a great conversation. It started off with
Thank you.
Paul sort of talking about the beauty of what George Stoll's saying is, it's kind of like globalization of good and love for the Lord and love for the neighbor, and in the commonality between all religions of having that beautiful good in every religion. And then Calvin kind of jumped on that. He was all excited about globalization and things going on between Russia and Ukraine as an example of, Russia waking up to, hey, we're being bombed too, and this isn't good. So it's kind of waking us up to result of evil, and it affects us all. And then I jumped in. I forgot what I said. It's all about regeneration. It's all about being born again. Lord is the greatest love of the neighbor second, love thy neighbor as thyself, and then, of course, love of the world and love of self. In the right order, and putting the Lord first and living for that. And it's a process of regeneration and seeing the goodness, all the goodness around us and focusing on that. So,
Great.
is that...
Pass that back. I think we're going to have to get to all the groups, so we'll just take that much time for each. Be great.
There were only 2 peas in our pod, myself, Trevor, and Lee. And Lee started out talking about how the concept of unworthiness and narcissism sort of parallel each other and are closely connected, and primarily because they're just so distant from the source, so distant from God. And for me, the whole talk of George's reminded me of my favorite George Dole quote, which he both said in our Flames class when I was a teen and from the podium here several times, that heaven is not a reward for being good. Heaven is how it feels to be good. That's the quote.
Thank you, Trevor. Harry, would you introduce your group first names, and then any one idea or more that came up would be great.
My name is Harry. This is Kune, and he's Prince. So one of our idea is
You could hand it over,
Yeah,
sure.
We came kind of late, but we pick up one thing.
Put the mic closer to
Oh,
your,
now?
thank you.
Yeah, we came kind of late, but we saw one idea, and we kind of like discussing together about what things we can improve to our life. It's very interesting to know all this concept, but what I should really work on. And sometimes it's kind of difficult to identify what you could work on your life. But if you are in the right shape, you are in the right state, you can pick something in your life that you could work on and can improve it for being good.
So yeah, speaking about what you love, and we kind of like spoke about loving your neighbor, and we mostly leaned on communication, because we felt like you could love your neighbor any way you want to love your neighbor, but if you can't communicate in terms of communicating to someone emotionally, being emotionally intelligent, it doesn't really help. So communication kind of like plays a very vital role. So we're mostly talking about communication and how we can improve on that communication and emotionally tap into someone else, because Christianity is more about being emotionally available, being intelligent, and also being emotionally available to someone, expressing yourself and helping someone else express themselves. And I feel like that kind of like builds a community, and that's what it's more about. So that's what we focused on talking about today.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Somehow I got the mic. I'm Debbie, and I was with Amy and Marilee, and Marilee just said, all I could think about is how much I loved George and how much George influenced my life of religion over all these years. And so that was an overwhelming feeling. And Amy talked about how she went to her little book box, and she had thought about she should really read New Jerusalem and the Heavenly Doctrines, and it was in there. And she picked it up and put it in her suitcase and brought it here, and how that was the Lord leading her to something really special that's going to happen this week as we learn. So those were just two powerful things. We talked about other things, and one of the thoughts I had is one of the things you said was gratitude, and how gratitude is important to be able to accept, but not to take as your own. And that was something that I thought was a good lesson, and as well as a bunch of other things we talked about.
Very quickly.
Thank you.
I'm Jessie, and David and I were speaking, and we did talk about the simplicity of good and truth being, caring about someone and understanding someone. And We talked about how things have changed since 2021. There was a lot of hope for things going in the right direction, and it feels like, at least in this country, there's been a little bit of a turnaround, but I think hoping that these simple ideas could be spread and people will start to love each other in a better way, and things will turn around. So those are just some thoughts that came up. I don't know, Dave, do you want to say anything else?
Okay. Well, listen, I thank you very much for. Okay, I'm having a message, and I'm not sure what it is. It is on. Well, I mean,
There's an online comment, Gard. You have quite a few online viewers right now, actually. Katie Brown wants to just say that humanity can never get there in systems that seek to control.
I didn't hear that, actually.
Did you not hear what I said?
I couldn't hear it. I couldn't make it out. I heard the.
Watch the screen. Watch the captions on the screen.
Thank you.
Okay. Katie Brown is watching online. You have a lot of online viewers right now, and she wants me to share with you that humanity can never get there in systems that seek to control others.
That's a problem. We agree. So with that, we are up to time. We'll have a little bit of a break between now and 10 o'clock, and I want to thank you for your attention and being here.